Hey everybody, Ace here with Samurai Pixel Cats. Recently I was approached by a company that makes an HDMI Upscaler because apparently I have had some experience reviewing these things, and so they asked me to review their device. And after they sent me a picture of it, I honestly couldn't say no because this thing's adorable. They modeled it after N64 cartridge, and of course you have some art there that's very reminiscent to Ocarina of Time and what looks like a couple screenshots of Ocarina of Time there. I figured I would do a review of this device. So basically the purpose of this device is to provide a solution for modern TVs that don't have composite inputs. This can take your composite input for your old consoles and upscale it to HDMI so that way newer TVs can read the signal. Basically, does this thing do its job well? Yeah, it's pretty good. I've definitely seen worse. I thought I would give you guys kind of just the general consensus before I get into the nitty-gritty so that you could, determine if you wanted to purchase it yourself. For the price, this thing's very cheap, and it does work. It does have some problems with the older consoles that output 240p, but for newer consoles, which is pretty much from PS1 era up to the Xbox, PS2, basically anything that doesn't have native HDMI output. So I mean, this thing does it pretty well. One thing I do like about this is it has a switch here that lets you switch between 4x3 and 16x9. I've actually never seen this feature on these upscalers before. Pretty much every upscaler I've ever seen automatically just always puts outputs in 16x9. So most modern TVs have some sort of setting where you can force it back down to a 4x3, but I like that this lets you on the device have that option because the PS2, GameCube, and Xbox do have games that support widescreen. So games in widescreen look excellent on this thing. Now, one thing to keep in mind is it does require a USB power to work, but most modern TVs have, at this point, multiple USB ports, and this is just a general kind of micro USB cable. It does come with one, and actually the one that they sent me came with an HDMI cable too, which was kind of surprising actually. So I mean, they come with everything you need. So with that out of the way, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. I actually got some film and some capture to show you guys exactly what this thing is capable of. So let's get to it. Nowadays, honestly, my setup has kind of evolved past the need for these devices, and I will make a video kind of showing off how all of this works eventually. But while these people aren't paying me to do this review, they did ask nicely if I would, since I have done reviews on these before, and they liked those videos. So I told them I would give my honest assessment on this device. So here goes. But before we jump into that, let's hear a word from our sponsor.
It's fucking nothing. You see that? Well, you can't. You know why? Because it's nothing!
First off, please forgive the quality of this part of the video. Filming another screen is an art form that I haven't quite mastered yet. The only reason I did this is I just wanted to show how well this thing would hold up when actually put to use. I hooked it up to a couple of the consoles, namely the NES, the Genesis, and the GameCube. I wanted to kind of get a good range of the kind of stuff that people would have on these. Overall, like I said in the intro, it does a pretty decent job doing what it's supposed to do, which is basically just provide a way to play consoles that have RCA inputs on TVs that don't have those inputs anymore. I mean, it's an outdated technology. Technology's moved on, but these consoles still exist, and it's getting harder and harder to find CRT TVs, plus no one wants to have those bulky things in their homes anymore anyway. The reason why I kind of wanted to give my conclusion early on in this video is, if you're just here for a quick review of the device, I really don't want to waste your time getting into the nitty-gritty before you know kind of how I feel with it. Given the fact that you can get it on Amazon for about $12, and if all you need is a quick way to be able to play games that have composite input on your TV that doesn't have composite, this is a perfectly good device. I've seen better, and usually those are more expensive, but I've definitely seen worse. I mean, this is a pretty good device, and I would recommend it. If you want to learn more and you want to see me kind of put this thing through its paces, you can continue watching the video, and I'll show you even more, and I'll get even more nitpicky on the things that I kind of do and don't like about this device. As you can kind of see with Mario Bros. 3 on the TV here, there is kind of a bit of a texture where there is supposed to be solid color, especially on the blinking 3 here. And the edges of the lettering are quite, kind of have some noise around them. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. The device doesn't really play all that well with older consoles that output at 240p, but it does do better with other consoles. I also recorded some Sonic 2 off of the Genesis here, and you can kind of see the same thing. It's pretty clear, the colors look great, the sound is still okay, but as you can see, kind of some of the edges have some noise around them. And on larger TVs, it will be more noticeable, but if you sit far enough back, it looks perfectly passable, I think. Finally, with the TV testing, I went ahead and picked the GameCube because it has some good colorful games. I didn't want something that was like too dark, something with good colors and contrast. As you can see, the text here looks pretty good. It's like I said, the newer consoles have a higher resolution. Normally these put out a 480i signal, so the device doesn't have to work quite as hard to upscale that as it does for the older 240p signals. And overall, anything from like the PlayStation on looks pretty good with this device. If you're really into super retro stuff, I'm sure you're the kind of person who probably has other upscale devices, but if you just have, you know, like a PS2 or GameCube, Xbox, anything like that, and you just want to be able to play it on a TV with the HDMI, this is a great device to do so. I also have a kind of a test suite that you can run on a Sega CD, and it's a really good way to show some of the issues that do come up with this device. As you can kind of see here, these color bars are supposed to be vertical lines. It's a little hard to see in here until you get down to the white. Those are supposed to be black and white vertical lines. But for some reason, whatever the upscaler is doing to de-interlace the signal just makes a rainbow. You can switch it to a checkerboard pattern, and it seems to do a little bit better displaying that. But for some reason, if it's just a vertical stripe, you get the rainbow effect. It's also shown here with this grid. Again, these are supposed to be pure white lines, but for whatever reason, you're kind of getting this RGB rainbow effect on the vertical. The horizontal lines look fine, but for some reason, the vertical lines are rainbowed. In my previous upscaler reviews, I would get a lot of questions asking about input lag for these devices. And I gotta say, I'm pretty impressed with this device because there's pretty much no lag with this. The 240p test suite does have a lag test app. And you can see I'm kind of failing here, but that may also come down to my reaction time. There was a point where I was able to actually time it with the beeps and got 0 frame. But generally, with my reaction time and everything going through the upscaler over HDMI to our 4K TV, you're only getting at most 1 to 3 frames lag input. And I'm sure like if you're some super fighting game fan where everything has to be, frame perfect, that's unacceptable. But if all you want to do is just play Halo or something like that, 1 to 3 frames of lag is really not that big a deal. And it's actually pretty impressive that there is so little lag to begin with this device. Moving on, I will now show what the device kind of looks like through my capture card over both Composite and the Upscaler. You'll see Composite on the right, I'll have that labeled, and the Upscaler on the left. And I will say right off the bat, the one thing I noticed is the Upscaler seems to have slightly, not just brighter, but a little bit better contrast than the raw Composite input. A We'll be going from kind of oldest generation to the latest generation that would need it. I'm not going to include any consoles that have native HDMI support because that defeats the purpose of this device anyway. If you have a TV that doesn't have composite but does have HDMI, just get an HDMI cable for your console. Like, it's way cheaper than this device even. So starting off with the Atari 800 XL, we have Frogger, which is pretty much impossible to frame match because all the patterns for the logs and stuff are pretty much random. But you get the idea. You can kind of see a little bit of blurriness on the right side with the composite, and it's a bit of a clearer picture on the left side with a little bit brighter colors. Then we'll take a look at Miss Pac-Man here, and one thing I noticed is you can kind of see how the black is a bit brighter on the composite side, and you have more pure black on the left side with the upscaler. But you have this weird kind of ghosting thing with the pellets on the left side with the upscaler, and I think that's an artifact that's whatever's going on with the vertical lines that causes the rainbow effect is probably what's going on here. So the right side, in my opinion, does look a little better. Also, when it switches over to the blue map on the left side with the upscaler, you can kind of see some vertical banding that's not present on the composite signal. Moving on, we have the Sega Master System with Wonder Boy and Monster Land. This one is interesting because the text is a little clearer on the upscaler side, but the background is a little bit more blue on the composite side. And you can kind of see the color's a little bit darker on the composite side, but you can kind of see that there's a bit of more blurriness, and the picture's a bit more stable on the upscaler side. Also on the Master System, we have Columns, which is a bit more static, so you don't really have the blurriness issue. But as you can see, the gems in the playfield are a little bit clearer. There's a bit of a blur on the composite side in the gems. So the picture overall is a bit better on the upscaler side there. Next up, we have the NES, showing off some Kickle Cubicle. There's not a whole lot of difference here. I think the colors do look a little bit brighter and they kind of pop more on the upscaler side. And of course the image is a bit more stable on the upscaler side than the composite side. Also on the NES we have City Connection, which the title screen here, you can kind of see the weird rainbow effect in the logo that you don't really see on the right side with the composite, but the right side is a little bit more blurry. Since this one has a lot of motion, the blur is a bit more apparent on the composite side. Moving on up to the Super Nintendo, we'll show off some Mario World. Like with the NES, the colors seem to be pretty much the same, with a little bit more clarity on the left side with kind of a blurry edge on hard edges on the composite side. Also, here's some Legend of Zelda, and this one actually has a couple of quirks that I thought were kind of interesting. I'll show you a couple of freeze frames of what I was talking about. Whenever the sword hits the Z here, it kind of flashes different colors, and the interesting thing is the first color it flashes is red, but for some reason on the upscaler side, it's green. Now, I don't know exactly why, but I think it has something to do with the way the device de-interlaces the signal. And you can kind of see as I move on to the next frame, it's supposed to be a blue, and you can barely see, I don't know how easy it's going to see, but you can see lines of where blue is supposed to be. But I think because of the way the device is de-interlacing, it's skipping over some of that color information. And that may be why it's translating red to green in the frame before. And the reason I think that is part of the reason how they're able to get this semi-transparent color effect is basically the gradient or the color fill is interlaced. And to kind of demonstrate what I'm talking about, I'll move ahead to the end of the opening cutscene here that shows some magic being done. And on the right side, you can see that it's just suddenly, the picture has gotten brighter. And the way they pull that off is, the background layer has a semi-transparent color overlaid over it to brighten the image. But on the upscaler side, that smooth color fill has a bunch of lines in it. So it's skipping scanline information, and so that is causing some color incorrectness. But overall, other than those two little nitpicks, the game itself looks pretty good. Moving on to the Sega Genesis, we have some Sonic 2, which I think will be a good example of some good fast action to kind of show the clarity versus the blurriness between the upscaler and the composite signal. Now, part of the reason why you have this difference between the upscaler and the composite signal comes down, I'm not sure if it's 100% my capture card, because the composite signal, the analog signal to my capture card, is capped at the kind of the TV broadcast 29.97 frames per second. So that causes a lot of frames to kind of bleed over into each other. However, the HDMI signal is a solid 60 frames per second, so you don't get a lot of that ghosting. It has enough information to properly show each frame. But overall, the composite signal is a bit of a blurry signal to begin with, so a lot of the text is going to be blurry no matter what. Also on the Sega Genesis, we have an excellent game that is Ranger X. Now the colors in Ranger X are a little muted, so there's really not much difference between the right and left side, but I think it is a little bit brighter and clearer on the upscaler side. So in my opinion, I think it does look a little bit better. Moving on to the Sega CD, we'll take a look at Batman and Robin, and you can kind of see the color difference here on the main screen. The color on the left looks a little more orange than red, and I'm not sure which one is the correct one. I think the red side actually does look a little bit better over on the composite side. Also on the Sega CD, we'll take a look at NBA Jam, and it's pretty much the same. The colors generally look the same, but again, you get a little bit more clarity with the upscaler than the raw composite. Moving on, we'll take a look at these 32X, because I know a lot of people who buy this device will have a 32X also to use it with. Let's take a look at Virtua Racer. I think the color, here's where the colors kind of start to pop a little bit better on the upscaler side, and the clarity and the fast motion helps a lot. Also take a look at Knuckles Chaotix here, and again, similar to Sonic 2, because it's kind of a fast-paced game, the right side is going to be a lot blurry with a lot more ghosting than the left side. Moving on up to the PlayStation 1, and you're going to kind of start seeing the upscaler shine at this point. I think, honestly, the composite side looks a little darker and washed out. And here's where I mentioned earlier, where the colors and contrast pop actually a lot better with the upscaler. Plus, you have that clarity. The hard edges a little bit easier to see. Text is a little bit easier to read, and it can handle the fast motion a bit better. Also take a look at Misadventures of Tronbon, and as you can see in the cutscene here, the right side is a lot darker than the left side. And I think part of that is kind of there's a bit of a lighting difference, but you can kind of see it in the text bubble too. And moving on to the gameplay, you can kind of see the right side just looks a little more washed out and dull compared to the left side with the upscaler. Moving on to the N64, we'll take a quick look at Excitebike 64. And again, you can kind of see that the contrast is a bit better with the upscaler. It's a little bit washed out on the right side. And also on the N64, we'll take a quick look at Mischief Makers. To me, again, the left side with the upscaler looks a lot better than the raw composite input on the right. Next up from that same generation, we'll take a look at the Sega Saturn. I popped in Fighters Megamix, but because of the way it chooses to do its demos, it picks a random fight, so I can't really frame match actual gameplay. But here's a bit of the opening cinematic. You can see, again, the colors on the right are a bit washed out and a little blurry. It's a little bit clearer on the left side, and again, contrast just looks so much better. Also take a look at Courier Crisis for the Sega Saturn. Hard edges are a bit more clear on the left side, the colors pop a little bit better, and again, there's just overall a lot less blurriness. Moving on to the next generation, we'll take a look at a couple of Dreamcast games, starting here with Power Stone. And as you can see with the gameplay, it has pretty fast gameplay, so you can see, the extra clarity on the left side does help a lot. And again, I think the contrast does help a little bit. It looks less washed out in this game, but it does look a little bit darker. But I don't think it's dark enough to where it's difficult to see what's going on, or any more difficult than it is on the composite side. And also on the Dreamcast, we have Toy Commander. With this one, you can kind of see a bit of a difference in coloring, especially on the orange tiles of the floor there. And you can just kind of see that there's a difference in the way these two devices, or at least the upscaler renders colors over composite. Up next, we'll take a look at the PS2 and Sonic Heroes. This one is definitely a case where the increased contrast actually does make it a bit easier to see on the left side. In some of the darker areas, it's a little bit too washed out and dark to get a good picture on the composite side. Also on the PS2, let's take a look at time splitters. Again, the right side is a bit dark because this is kind of a dark level. It's a little bit easier to see what's going on with the upscaler than raw composite. Moving on to the GameCube, we'll take a look at Monkey Ball. Again, this time it's through my capture card instead of filming from the TV. I think this one kind of shows off some of the best improvement that you get from the upscaler. The text on the left side looks a bit more clear. The colors kind of pop a little bit better on the left side. And again, you get that blurriness during action on the right side with composite that's just not there with the upscaler. Also on the GameCube, we'll take a little look at Bomberman Generation. Once again, the colors are a little bit more vibrant with the upscaler and just a little overall better quality picture. Finally, we'll move on to the Xbox, and this is pretty much the only time you can really use the 4:3 to 16:9 switch. You can set the Xbox to just output at 16:9 native. For the GameCube and the PS2, it depends on the game, and you have to go into the game settings on a lot of those games to get an actual 16:9 picture. But with the Xbox, you can just do that native with the console. We'll take a first look at Blink's Time Sweeper on the Xbox. Again, this is kind of a dark game, or at least this is a dark level, and you get a bit better picture on the left side with the upscaler, with a bit better color depth also than the composite side. And finally, also on the Xbox, we'll take a look at Stubbs the Zombie, and this is one thing that I find kind of interesting in that the game itself kind of has this film grain filter over it because it's supposed to be like a 50s style B-movie kind of aesthetic to it. So you get this film grain, but because of the way that the upscaler de-interlaces everything, it kind of gets rid of the film grain effect too. So I'm not sure how I feel about that. You actually do get a little bit of a clearer picture, like it clears up the film grain a little bit, but the game's supposed to have that, so you're kind of losing a bit of the aesthetic. So maybe, I mean, this might not have been a great example, but I think it kind of shows off too some of the differences in color depth and brightness, and shows that, hey, even film grain, the upscaler can kind of filter a little bit of that out. So that's pretty much my overall thoughts on this device. Pretty long-winded. I appreciate it if you stayed this far to get a better view of what this thing can and can't do. Like I said, I have seen better products on the market, and I have definitely seen worse. You've seen one of my reviews where I found I had one of these devices that refused to even work on any console that went below 480i. So anything on like the N64, Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, anything like that, just either wouldn't work or was black and white, or the screen would jump and flicker like crazy. So I can leave a link down to the Amazon listing for this device. Again, last time I checked, or at least at the time of making this video, it's only $12 if you just need a quick answer to play your retro consoles on a modern TV. This is definitely as good a device as any. I appreciate you watching this far, and I'll see you in the next video, whatever that may be.